Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
Do you find it hard to be honest? I mean, totally and completely honest, both with your spouse and in life in general. And if you're like most people, you do have difficulty with this. Sometimes this is because you aren't really clear on what you think or want. But most of the time, it's because you want to avoid something, hurting or disappointing your partner, to avoid a fight, whatever it might be. But one of the signs of a healthy, functioning relationship is honesty. And one of my prescriptions to my clients is to say what you mean and mean what you say. But there is a way of being that mucks all this up. And that's what today's show is about. Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, also known as the Relationship Help Doctor, is here to talk about the impact of passive-aggressive behavior on a relationship. So, Dr. Shaler, thanks so much for being on the show to talk about this interesting behavior.
Well, it's my pleasure to be your guest, Leslie, and it's way more than interesting.
So, I'm going to bring up a personal story in a minute, but you wrote a piece that appeared on Hello Love, which is an internet magazine, titled 12 Signs of Passive-Aggressive Behavior That Passive-Aggressives Don't See. Funny that. Why would that be? So to start with, can you explain exactly what passive-aggressiveness is and also what makes it problematic?
Sure. Passive-aggressive behavior is a pattern people get into who have had certain backgrounds, and it's a pattern of indirectly expressing negative feelings instead of being open and, as you were saying earlier, honest. So it's a disconnect between words and actions, and it shows up as resentment or opposition to demands or requests of other people, especially people close to you, procrastination, making intentional mistakes, being cynical and sullen and hostile, or constantly complaining about being underappreciated, cheated, and not valued.
Oh, dear. Okay, so you just gave this lovely list. It was like, so that's why it's problematic, right? It's because people are acting in ways that aren't really about what they feel.
Yes, it's indirect aggression. So it's sneaky and it's nasty. And you don't really have the ability to put your finger on it sometimes when it first happens. It just doesn't feel good. It's kind of underlying passive hostility and avoiding direct communication. And so it has all kinds of faces that we can talk about, but it's really difficult because it's kind of underground and undermining.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that I talk about is, words are easy and not necessarily accurate. It's people's behavior that actually tells you where the truth is. So is that kind of what how passive-aggressive shows up, is that I'm saying one thing, but I'm actually doing something else?
Yes, it definitely shows up. And the way that I express that in my work is I tell people to follow my formula, ABB. And ABB stands for always believe behavior, because no matter what the words say, the behavior is your belief. Your behavior always is your belief. It'll always out you if your words are not matching. So, yes, passive-aggressive behavior shows up in the behavior of either expressing in a passive-aggressive way or failing to express the truth of what you're feeling.
So in my opening, I was actually talking about sometimes people aren't honest because they really don't know what their thoughts and feelings are. but I'm understanding that that's actually different from somebody who's passive aggressive, because if you're passive aggressive, you actually know what you want, you actually know what you feel, but you're not following through on it. Is that correct?
Well, it could be. Some passive-aggressive people are not in touch with their resentment or their bitterness or their hostility. So all they know is they don't feel good, and so they're sullen or cynical, as I said, or, putting out an attitude of, well, nothing is ever right, and you want too much from me. But some people just withhold the truth. They're afraid. They're afraid of conflict. So instead of saying what's so for them and being honest, even to be able to say, I'm not even sure how I feel about that, is more honest than deciding that, it's okay. So when you say it's okay, and it really isn't, but you're trying to avoid a conflict with that person, that's where the passive-aggressive nastiness comes in.
So is being passive-aggressive different than being a people-pleaser? Because I know people-pleasers will say yes to things because they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or they're trying to avoid a conflict. Are they the same thing or different?
No, they're different in some ways. They have some similarities. People-pleasers just simply are trying to say, the warm puppy, how do you like me so far? If I do this, will you like me? If I do this, will you like me? I don't want to get on your downside. But a passive-aggressive person is a person who's really not happy within themselves. And so they are looking at behaviors that say, I'm not going to tell you what's wrong. I'm going to show you that you're wrong. And so they'll do things. Like an example I give in my book about this, one of the books about it, is I had this experience with a passive-aggressive person. I said, will you do this for me? It's really important that it happens on Saturday night, and I won't be around, and I really need it to happen because it impacts my week. And the answer was, yes, of course, yes, I'll do it. And I knew this fellow, so I said, are you sure you can do it? Because if you can't, I'll get someone else to do it. Of course I'll do it. Of course I'll do it. So I came in on Saturday night, and I said, I can't find my dry cleaning that you said you'd pick up. And his response was, I have better things to do with my time than run your errands.
Wow.
Now, there's an example of passive aggression. He didn't want to tell me that he wasn't going to do it. He knew he wasn't going to do it, but he didn't want the fight in the moment to say he wasn't going to do it, so he said he was going to do it. Then he was happy to have the fight and make it my fault when he didn't do it.
Right. You're making my head spin right now. So I do want to get back to the 12 signs that you were talking about, and you mentioned some of them, and I want to go a little bit deeper into them because some appear to be related to communication and others to behavior. So I always start with communication no matter what I'm doing because, communication. So things like not speaking the truth, appearing to be sweet by agreeing, and like in the example you just gave, complaining about unfair treatment, making up stories or excuses. So what actually ties these together, and what's the impact on the relationships of the people that they're doing this with?
Well, those are huge questions, Leslie. What ties them together is that I have underlying resentment that I don't want to talk about, so I'll put a face on it that looks like everything is fine, but the undercurrents and the rumblings and the noises that are deafening in their behavior are definitely there. So they put the nice face on it because they don't have the intestinal fortitude to speak up. They're afraid to speak up. And so that's what ties it together. How it impacts relationships is they're being undermined and undercut. People are being blindsided by remarks. One thing a passive-aggressive person often does, particularly in public, is they will make a snide or a subtle remark against you, and they will do it in public where they hope you won't react. so that it's this subterfuge, it's this underground hostility, and that's always under there in a relationship. So you learn to sidestep it, or walk as though you're on a minefield at all times, and that's really hard on a relationship.
So what underlies, here's a simple question for you. Why do people do this?
Yeah, so simple. Well, it's the way that they've experienced life to the time when they meet you. If you have not been free to express yourself as a young person, if you have been made to do things that you didn't want to do, maybe you've been abused, maybe you've had trauma in your life, and you don't feel like you have the right to speak up, you've never had the right to speak up, so you learn these coping behaviors that your seething underlying anger and disappointment or pain or trauma doesn't have a voice. And so it comes out in these sneaky little ways. It's like, that minefield, like there's something under here for sure, and every now and again you step in a creaky place that, really warns you. And that's what's happening. They don't necessarily even understand where it came from. They don't they certainly may not be doing it consciously, but it is all of this underlying life experience that tells them it's not safe to tell the truth. It's not safe to be me. It's not safe to speak up. So I will do it in this sneaky way.
So if I'm the partner of a passive-aggressive person, what am I experiencing other than craziness?
Well, craziness is a good start. Crazy making. And that's the way it is. I even wrote a book called Stop, That's Crazy Making, how to quit playing the passive-aggressive game, because that's exactly what it is. But you will experience it as total frustration. Really, again, that's happening. You promised, you're not doing it. You said you'd do something, you haven't done it yet, you've got an excuse, you're procrastinating. A lot of procrastination goes on. Maybe it's a simple example as this, Leslie, a simple frustrating example as this. Yes, I'll help you make dinner. Great. Would you cut the vegetables? Yeah, I will. Okay, great. I will do all the other things that need doing. So you come back and the vegetables are still whole. They're still sitting on the counter. And you say, you said you would cut the vegetables. Oh, I'll get to it. Don't bug me.
Right. And meanwhile, it's 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
have dinner, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're already on dessert, and the fruit, the vegetables are still sitting there on the counter because they don't want to do it, but they're afraid to say they don't want to do it. So they don't say they're not going to do it. So we just get that procrastination, and then it turns into, don't bother me. What do you think? I'm incompetent? I can't do it? You're always on my case. You're always, always on my case. I can't do anything right. I don't even know why I stay with you. And then there you are, the non-passive-aggressive person going, how did we get from cutting vegetables to I don't know why I stay with you?
Okay, so this is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dorries, and I'm talking with Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the relationship help doctor, about passive-aggressive behavior, what it looks like, and how it creates challenges in your relationship. So if you recognize yourself or your partner in these descriptions, you're not alone. It can be really scary to embrace what I call radical honesty in your marriage. But if you truly want an intimate relationship, it's necessary. So if you're interested in what that would look like, I invite you to get in touch and schedule your free, no-obligation, Create Your Happily Ever After discovery session. You can reach me by email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS, coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com. Or you can reach me by phone at area code 919 924-0463. That's 919-924-0463. And I want to get back to talking about, not really, but talking about passive-aggressive behavior because again, it's crazy making. So you're talking about, like, in this example you gave about the vegetables, about this procrastination. And you talked about with the dry cleaning, the quote-unquote forgetting. But you also have a couple of others that you talk about behaviors: sulking, pouting, withdrawing, acting superior, disdainful, or hostile. What makes those passive-aggressive behaviors as opposed to just obnoxious behaviors, or are they the same thing?
Well, they're certainly obnoxious, no question about that. But when it comes from a passive-aggressive base, the person never addresses the issue. So if I'm just straight up angry with you and I say to you, Leslie, I'm really angry with you right now, and here's why, that's direct communication. But if I'm not good at that, or I don't feel safe doing that, or I've never been safe doing it, or I don't know how to do it, then I'll go underground. And then I will be doing those things that are sulking and cynical and underlying hostility and on edge, and then it's coming from a different place, but I cannot put a name to it. I may not even know why I behave like that. People have things that are just in their background that came with their original software that allows them to behave in these ways. And if they don't ever do a defrag or run some malware and have a reason to say, I really want this relationship and I know I'm part of the problem, let's go and get some help, well, then they'll keep behaving that way. And that's where the total frustration comes, because the passive-aggressive person can never be wrong.
Oh, interesting. So you talk about that these behaviors are learned, which is good news because that means people can learn to do it differently. So, and you're talking about somebody becoming aware, but as the title of the article says, you're talking about passive-aggressive behavior that maybe passive-aggressives don't even know they're doing. and in the examples that you're giving, it's kind of like they flip the script on you. You're asking them, they offer to help you with dinner. You say okay. And then when you ask them, when you come back and go, make a comment like, the vegetables aren't done yet, then, then the whole thing gets flipped. So first off, how do people recognize or acknowledge that they're passive aggressive? Because of course you've got to understand it before you can change it, right? Well, some people never do, but I've had many, many clients because I have clients all around the world. So I've had many who have said, I know I'm passive-aggressive. I know that from what you've written or what you've said on podcasts and things, I know I'm passive-aggressive. I don't know why. So they get some help, right? You can get some help to understand why it is that you don't feel safe enough in the world to speak up and speak your truth and be honest with yourself. It's not about the other person, it's about you. And that's sometimes a really difficult topic to get around to. You don't want to think about yourself. It's much easier to blame everybody else, Sure. Passive-aggressive people like to be two ways. They like to be, how dare you ask me why I haven't finished the vegetables yet? And the other thing is, I know I can't ever do anything right. They vary between those two places, so sometimes it's difficult to name. But if they see that it's ruining their relationship and they want the relationship to work, they may do some work. Their partners may say, I can give a name to this behavior. Here is an example of it. And I will say to them, well, that's what passive-aggressive behavior is. That's passive-aggressive. And then they begin to see it,
that's what the progress through this is, if there's going to be any positive progress.
So I want to go back to the example of the person not picking up the dry cleaning. And so I would think that if somebody is involved with somebody who behaves like this, to me it's almost like Lucy Charlie Brown in the football.
Right.
It's like, okay, you keep telling me you're not going to take the football away, but every single time you do. So, and you even checked with this person, like, are you really sure you're willing to do this? And they assure you up one side, down the other, that they're willing to do this, and then it doesn't happen. So I would think that I would I would either stop asking this person. I wouldn't trust them to do this, which not trusting your partner is a whole conversation in and of itself. So if I'm the partner, I'm assuming that at some point in time, it's like, no, I've got this. No, I will do whatever I have to do. I'll ask somebody else to go by the dry cleaning, or I'll just chop up the vegetables. I mean, is that where partners end up?
Well, it is where they end up, and then they end up in resentment, and then they end up, if I have to do it all by myself anyway, what do I need you for? Mm-hmm. So eventually we get to that attitude where I say, all right, I'm looking after the children. I am the breadwinner in the family. I keep the house clean, and I feed and walk the dog. Where are you in this relationship? Because certainly you're not a partner, and you're certainly not a healthy adult partner. I always say, Leslie, that the foundation of any relationship to be a healthy adult relationship must have equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. That is the groundwork, not even just romantic relationships, for all adult relationships. And they will not be there in a passive-aggressive person. They do not have equality, reciprocity, and mutuality as part of their menu. So you can't select it. And if they're not interested in developing it or looking at it or seeing what kind of compromise we could make or agreement, then eventually the partner just says, hey, I might as well be alone. Yeah. So then we end up there. And, both men and women are passive-aggressive. It comes with their original packaging. And so if that's in the package that you made an agreement to be with, and you unwrap that package and you find, oh, my goodness, I didn't know this bit was in here, you may want to take it back to the store,
Sorry. When I met my husband, I was working in retail, and one of the stores I worked for at the time said, oh, you can take it back to Rich's. They take everything back. And he goes, you should take it back. I said, no, honey. So you talked about that it's possible for people to potentially recognize themselves as being passive aggressive. What kinds of things would bring this to their attention? I mean, other than listening to this show and reading your books. Because I would think if this is their normal, this is their normal.
Well, they get really unhappy. They're always on guard and unhappy. They never feel valued or equal. So sometimes if you approach it in, I'd like our relationship to work. I really need to feel well partnered, and I know you do too. Let's get some help. Let's move in a direction to unpack where we go sideways with each other, and let's make that safe to do because we really care. And when you do that, then you're signaling that, okay, I'll go to someone who's not going to say, hey, straighten up, buttercup. They're going to say, okay, I see that. Where do you think you needed that behavior in order to feel safe? Let's go back and look at that. Well, do you think you need it in this relationship? Or should we put that behavior back in your toolkit for if you're ever in that other kind of relationship? And let's maybe create a tool that works in this relationship. And so we forge the relationship in a new fashion.
which sounds wonderful, but then how also, because I know that this also has to be dealt with, especially if you're working with a couple, the resentment that has built in the non-passive aggressive partner, the ability for them to trust what hopefully is their former or recovering passive aggressive partner.
Well, sure, it's going to be a bit of a cha-cha, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But that's part of the process. If you want it to work, if you're really invested, then both parties have to be heard and seen and known and acknowledged and totally listened to, not only listened to by the therapist, but listened to by each other. And then they have to keep their eyes on the prize. Okay, there's lots of things about this relationship we love, lots of things we love about each other. There are a few things that need some tweaking. Some of them need eradicating. Some of them need replacing. That's just normal in the progress of a relationship. So let's commit to doing that. And when I work with couples, I work with them together and apart. So we work on integrating that again, the new behaviors. We work on healing the pain of the older behaviors. It takes a while. You didn't get there overnight. The person's been passive-aggressive since probably age 2. They've got work to do, and we can't expect them to just straighten up in an instant just because we went to see a therapist. But, that's the progress. Therapy for a couple, in my opinion, needs to be something that is so good for our relationship, even if it has tough moments, that we really like the result enough to want to keep going, even when it causes us some pain. If you really want to take up a martial art, you're going to get bruises and bumps. You're going to have pain. You're going to need an ice pack occasionally. But you really want to be able to do it because you understand the compelling why. And the same thing is true about couples coming into therapy and working on their issues because they love each other, because they want it to be good, because they want their children to have a very healthy model of what a relationship looks like.
Well, and I'm thinking as you're talking about this that maybe one of the things to not do is not to go to your partner and say you're passive aggressive, because I would think that probably wouldn't work very well. Because it is really about inviting each other to do better, because all of us have things to learn, and we all can do better in relationships. And really understanding that this is learned behavior by what happened to somebody in their past, and that there's a reason for it. It doesn't mean that it's not harmful and that it doesn't need to be addressed in a productive way, but that it's really a coping defense mechanism from when they were helpless children who couldn't determine their what they could do and what they couldn't do, and so they just found this as a protective behavior, which I'm learning. This is all a lot of the trauma work that's going on now that I think is so critically important for people to understand, and that this is, like you said, this can be from another form of trauma, and people think of trauma like war and car accidents and life-threatening illnesses, where trauma can be all kinds of things. And it sounds as if a lot of compassion would be helpful.
Well, a lot of compassion is helpful, Leslie, except it has to be a balance of two kinds.
Right.
And this is one of the things that causes resentment, is a lack of balance between self-compassion and compassion for others. And each one of us is really wise to get that into balance, because when we are overly compassionate for others for too long, we start to go into resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we go into resentment, and maybe someone's told us nice people are not resentful, then we start beating ourselves up for being resentful, and it all gets really messy. So it's important to see those pieces of the journey.
Right. And I love it because for me, and I think you just hit this really clearly, although that's not exactly what you said, but resentment, if resentment shows up, that's a symptom of something bigger and is worth investigating. So whether it's passive aggressive or some other unproductive behavior that's going on in a relationship, that resentment can be a real clue.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine going through your days, getting up in the morning and already being at a level that's higher than it should be just because of the resentment from months, weeks, and years of being together.
Mm-hmm.
And that means your energy is being used to fuel the resentment. It is not available for the now and to see your partner as they are now. And, you get into these patterns and you get stuck. So It's a good idea to find a new pattern.
Well, and that's an important way to think about it. That this is a pattern, which means, and again, it's learned behavior, which means we can learn to do it differently, but the desire has to be there. Is really what I'm hearing you saying. So, Rhoberta, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about what I'm sure a lot of the listeners are going to go, oh, maybe that's us. Where can people find out more information about your books and about, like I said, just getting more information about this topic in general?
Sure. You can go to my website, FOR relationshiphelp, HELP.com. You'll find the blogs, you'll find products, you'll find courses, you'll find books. You can come to my podcast, SaveYourSanityPodcast.com, Help for Toxic Relationships. You can go to my YouTube channel, same name, For Relationship Help, over 550 videos there to help you with this. And, of course, you can put my name in Amazon, SHALER, and you will find the books that I've written. I've written 16 books. They're not all on Amazon, but there are 2 on passive aggression. One, as I mentioned, is called Stop That's Crazy Making, How to Quit Playing the Passive Aggressive Game. And the other is called The Hijackal Trap, The Hidden Anger of Passive Aggression. And so inform yourself. Get the bells ringing, say, I think that's what it is that's going on and going south in my relationship, and then reach out and get some help. If people want help from me, I offer a new client 1-hour introductory session for only $97, and you can have that at beaclient.com.
Well, great, and thank you so much for this. And I just want to say that if you've recognized yourself or your partner in today's show, please don't despair, but do be willing to take action. You might not have completely understood the impact of this type of behavior, but now that you know, continuing to do or allow unproductive things in your marriage will be on you. So hopefully one of the things that you will keep taking action on is to keep listening to this show. And until next week, stay loving.